Welcome, everyone. This is Professor Nasiruddin, the Director of Refugee and Migration Lab. We call RML. This is one of the events. We frequently organize events, particularly virtual events, to connect people working on refugee and migrations from around the world. Good morning, good evening, good noon, good afternoon, because I know this event is, it's many people, hundreds of thousands of people from around the world watching this event from different time zones. We have wonderful panelists today. The topic today, we are actually organizing this event on the 8th Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day. Particularly, we know that the date was actually 25th of August, and we are organizing this event after 4 days. So it's the actually event on the 8th Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day 2025. The panel discussion today, the title of the panel, the Rohingya Genocide, Legal, Political, and Practical Implications. We have 4 distinguished panelists today, and we know the Professor Dr. Azim Ibrahim, the author of the Rohingya, the Inside Myanmar's Hidden Genocide. We have Professor Dr. Shahebanam Khan, a decade-long commentators on the Rohingya crisis at a global scale. We have Dr. Ronald Lee, the author of the Myanmar's Rohingya Genocide, Identity, History, and Hate Speech. We have one of the panelists, Radia Sultana, internationally known human rights activist and leading Rohingya voice. And this event is supported by University College London, one of the projects called Politics of Genocide, Politics of Denial and Non-Recognitions of Genocide. And this project is funded by British Academy. As our format, what we'll go before going to the panelists, I want to give a kind of brief introductions. When we observe 8th Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day, it does not essentially mean that Rohingya people experienced genocide just 8 years ago. Means 2017. Even before 2017, Rohingya people experienced genocidal, activities perpetrated by Myanmar state and Myanmar security forces. And many of you might know, 2015, there are 2 credible reports published, one from Yale Law School, another one from Queen Mary University. They categorically declared that this is kind of, research findings that the Rohingya people were having, experienced kind of genocidal activities from the state part. So it's just not essential when we observe this, 8th Genocide Remembrance Day, it does not essentially mean that Rohingya people experienced actual genocidal act just in 2017, long before that. Many of you might know, Mong Jani wrote about this slow burning genocide. So there are genocidal activities from long before. We have wonderful panelists, and we will listen to our panelists, and we will learn and will engage what kind of genocide experience. We'll see why the Rohingya people, the genocide survivors, what their position at this time now. And we also know there are kind of genocidal trial going on at the International Court of Justice, and what's the status of this genocide trial. And we also try to understand from the discussions that actually, why does genocide recognitions matter for the victims, particularly the case of Rohingya refugee. That's the beginning. Just note, I will first invite Dr. Ronald Lee to reflect on to this topic, Rohingya genocide, legal, political, and practical implication.
Thanks very much. Look, absolutely fantastic to be with you today. I mean, it's important that events like this are held where scholars have an opportunity to reflect on the tragic events of 2017. Let me talk first about 2017 very briefly, and then I want to talk about the Genocide Convention, and I'll do my best to link that with kind of the contemporary debates and things that are affecting the Rohingya. It's a human tendency, I think, that when something overwhelming happens, that's the thing that we commemorate and recognize and remember. And 2017 was certainly a catastrophic event affecting the Rohingya community. There's no question about that. And August 25th has become, it's the day that we recognize and annually, and we remember the Rohingya genocide. But the genocide against the Rohingya didn't start in 2017. And there's lots of arguments that could be made that 2017, while it was the activities that brought this to international attention, was in fact far from the start, but was in fact the culmination of decades of genocidal mistreatment of the Rohingya community. So I'll talk about the Genocide Convention, because that really, when we talk about international law, that's what we're often going to be discussing. There's lots of confusion internationally. There's lots of confusion among academics. There's confusion among activists about what, in fact, is genocide. And I'm not going to get into the differences between what we might think genocide is in sociological terms and what it is in legal terms. What it is in legal terms is what's important, I think, for international law. What it is in sociological terms is important probably for the Rohingya community. But what it is in legal terms is genocide is an international crime that's been recognized since 1948 as part of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. I mean, that's the Genocide Convention. And the Genocide Convention aims to prevent and punish genocide by doing various things. It creates an obligation on governments to take action to prevent and punish genocide, and it's the key element of it in terms of punishment and in terms of recognizing legally what is genocide is its second article, Article 2, and Article 2 is where things get really complicated, because on the surface it seems like something very straightforward. It basically sets out what is genocide, and it says any of the following acts with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So the convention then lists the types of things that might be considered the actions that would be used to do that, and it lists 5 of them. I'll just summarize. I mean, the pretty you would know what is killing members of the group, serious bodily or mental harm to the group, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about physical death in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births, and forcibly transferring children to another group. So on the surface, that seems pretty straightforward. That would seem to be a situation where it would be very clear what genocide is. But very quickly we discovered that in terms of international justice, there are a couple of things to be considered, because you've got to remember the perpetrators always deny. They always say they didn't do it. So what do we need to consider here? Well, first of all, are there genocidal acts? Secondly, is there intent to destroy in whole or in part? So intent on the part of the perpetrator. And is the intent and the actions to destroy affecting a group that fits within the remit of the Genocide Convention, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group? And this is where we get, those 3 elements are where we get all of the contestation and the debate and the differences of opinion about is the shocking mistreatment of a group of people or of individuals, does that equal genocide in terms of the law? Now, in terms of what we can look at what we know has happened to the Rohingya community. Well, let's first of all talk about it. Are we dealing with a national, ethnical, racial, religious group? Well, obviously, we would say we are. That's very clear. But that's not the view of the Myanmar government, the Myanmar authorities, the Myanmar military. Their view, and they've argued this in the International Court of Justice, is that the Rohingya are not a discrete group. And I'm sure others will talk about the Rohingya's long history within Myanmar and within the area that is today Rakhine State, formerly Arakan. I mean, in my view, I think it's unquestionable. But that's an argument that the Myanmar military and the Myanmar government has put to the International Court of Justice, that the Rohingya don't fit within that there's something different. And then the question of intent becomes significant. Is the intent to is there intent to destroy in whole or in part? Now, I think if we look at 2017 in isolation, we find you could well legally find that it's very difficult to prove intent. And that's why it's important that when we examine the situation of the Rohingya, we don't just simply pick 1 month or 1 week or 1 year, because the culmination of decades of mistreatment is nothing but the culmination of decades of mistreatment. It's not a recognition of what is the legal nature of the mistreatment. And then we can look at the acts. So in terms of what acts have occurred, yes, there's been killing, serious bodily harm. For me, I think in terms of the strongest, clearest case that this is a genocide is the third element: deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part. And I think that when Mongzani writes about the slow burning genocide, and I know Azim has written about the patterns here too, it's the conditions of life that come through very clearly over decades as making the Rohingya's existence within Myanmar unviable as a group. And you really can't achieve that as a government without intending to do it, because you're treating the Rohingya differently to how you're treating other people. But that's the legal situation of where the Rohingya fit within all of this in terms of the Genocide Convention. Now, what's happened with the case, the Gambia's case at the International Court of Justice? So the Genocide Convention is an agreement between states, between governments. It's so the Gambia as a signatory, and Myanmar is a signatory. Burma was one of the early signatories. So the Gambia has taken an issue with Myanmar, and it has said, its claim is Myanmar is not fulfilling its obligations under the Genocide Convention to punish and prevent all the things that I've described. So inflicting conditions of life, killing, serious bodily harm, intent to destroy, all of those things. And this has found its way into a case at the International Court of Justice. Now, other countries have joined on. I mean, most Western countries have now signed on, as well as the OIC is obviously the early part of this.
No, just 2 minutes. You need to
no problem.
Up the first round of discussions, 2 minutes. Okay, carry on.
No worries at all. That's perfect timing for me. So where we are is that Myanmar has defended itself at the International Court of Justice. Aung San Suu Kyi, who was then the state councillor, went to the International Court of Justice to defend Myanmar, and the case was the Rohingya aren't a real group. What happened to them there was not intent to destroy the group. The killings were for other reasons. They were not genocidal, and so on. The Gambia's case obviously is the opposite of that, as you can imagine. The Gambia's case is the sort of case that you would imagine you would understand if you read my work, or Azim's work, or Shaib's work. I mean, you read the work that we're talking about today. Now, the court's very slow to address these things, and what it did to begin with is it ordered provisional measures to forestall any further crimes against the Rohingya within Myanmar. And every 6 months, a report is given to the court by the government of Myanmar as to what measures it's taking to prevent and punish the crime of genocide within the country and not let the genocide continue. Okay. But that's not been enforced. And that's the situation the Rohingya find themselves in today. They've got a case in the International Court of Justice. they've had a provisional measure while the bigger case has been examined, but there's no outcome yet.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ronald Lee. Dr. Ronald Lee, he has wonderfully illustrated, explained the definition and international legal framework, particularly in the context of 1948 Genocide Conventions and 1998 Rome Statutes, and also the position of the case filed by Gambia, and where actually Rohingya people belongs to this stage. We will come up with around the clock. Now I will welcome Professor Dr. Shahab Inam Khan from the University of Professionals for your first round of discussions for 10 minutes. Please, Professor Shahab Inam
Khan. Thank you, Professor Nasir. Am I audible?
Yeah, it's loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And I was listening to Ronan, and I think he has really pointed on several key issues, particularly with the International Court and the proceedings of the International Court. And I think there are a number of confusions that is circulating around in and within the court and outside of the court, and mostly related to the intent of genocide. And I think Ronan has really focused on that there is no argument over the intent of genocide, because if you look at the entire structural components of the genocide is very much real. And I think what Ronan was really highlighting, the historical precedences, and those are very much there. I mean, I was actually, when we were discussing, I was looking into conversation and the letters, or those days they used to call it sevengram, telegram and sevengram, between the embassies or High Commission, the British High Commission in Rangoon and London, and back in 1920s, 30s, 40s, the communication clearly attributed to the structural issues that eventually led to decades of genocide, decades of pushing the Rohingyas out of the entire statist system, is very much alive. And in front of me right now, I was looking into this letter written 14th December 1948, where the embassy in His Majesty's embassy in Rangoon, writing to Deputy High Commissioner in Dhaka, is saying that the whole idea of pushing the Rohingyas out of the region is very much visible. The idea of regional autonomy in the division is gaining ground, and so on, so on. And overwhelmingly, those are the Arakanese Rohingyas. Now, that I think those particular historical contexts, if we factor in, then we really see that the whole trajectory moving towards 2017 was very much alive. And the problem then, again, is it only Tatmadaw who is a part of it? I mean, we have been largely focusing on, and I think, Professor Nasir, you have talked about it, is it only the state and Tatmadaw being responsible for it, or whether there are other willing accomplices? And I think Ronan has talked about Aung San Suu Kyi, and perhaps the whole NLD cabinet back in time was also the part of the whole genocidal campaign. And Ms. Suu Kyi has actually went to international court and in favor of the act of the Tatmadaw. And that also says that, can we really look into this entire gamut of genocidal intent from one particular perspective, that is Tatmadaw? And this is where my major concern comes in. And I think we're overstretching on Tatmadaw, which is absolutely needed, but definitely bypassing the whole structure. Now, even if you look at the Arakan army over the past few months, I mean, has they been able to really provide any kind of resolution or solution to the Rohingya crisis? Rather, we are now seeing that is adding to another level of genocidal intent, which is making the entire Rohingya ballgame even to the quarter, where we are now seeing that no resolution is coming out. And subsequently, when I looked into the cases of historicity. And I think Dr. Ibrahim will also be talking about, and his fantastic book, The Rohingyas Inside Myanmar's Genocide, has really given us a clear indication of how historicity of Rohingya has made the Rohingyas illegitimate invaders from Bangladesh. And even if you look at the Arakan Army's vocabulary over the past few months, shifting from Rohingya to the Muslims, to the Chittagonians, to whatnot, even to a great extent, Indian Muslims too. And that also feeds into the whole momentum of what Azim Ibrahim would argue about slow motion genocide. And that slow motion genocide hasn't stopped with the Arakan army coming into the play. So now, when you ask this question about the genocidal intent and post-genocidal intent, and I think one of the largest weakness that we have always been facing is putting too much pressure or focus on the military content of this entire genocide, while you also have the other actors who has been a willing accomplice to this whole issue. The second important factor about the international court, and this is where I think one of the major problems comes is the universal jurisdiction, and I'm quite sure in the subsequent sections we will be discussing about it. And when it comes, then again another level of question arises, that how functional that international court will be in the coming months. Now, having discussed about all these issues, the actors, the institutions, and the systemic structure to really push the Rohingyas out of the Myanmar territory, leads us to very complicated question. Then how many actors are we going to deal with? I mean, now I'm talking from a very Bangladesh perspective, and I'm being very actively involved in this process for quite some time, is that are we going to only rely on the Tatmadaw being the cause and the solution to Rohingya issue? Are we going to look into Arakan Army as the solution, or perhaps it is adding to the structural violence against the Rohingyas, or perhaps the intent of genocide against the Rohingyas? And then subsequently, we are also now seeing that the geopolitics is coming in. And when the geopolitics comes in, the biggest question is that how far can we really go with the international court when it comes to its implementation in future? So overall, what I get to see from Ronan, and I think Ronan is absolutely right, is that in the coming months, perhaps these intent and then subsequently intent being amplified by different other stakeholders is certainly not going to give us a very concrete direction towards the resolution of the Rohingya conflict or Rohingya crisis.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Shahabanam Khan. You talked about a lot of issues, particularly their identity crisis, also whether they are illegal Bengali migrants in Bangladesh, they are not recognized even as a refugee, and to some extent, even they are, kind of forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals. There is no, indications and notations of Rohingya in the legal documents. So there are different forms of, discriminations going on. And also, you brought about the idea of slow burning genocide, also Monk Johnny's idea. And Azim also wrote about hidden genocide. Genocide actually is going on long before 2017. Now I will welcome Professor Azim Ibrahim for your first round of reflections. Professor Azim Ibrahim.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nasser. It's a great honor for me to be here, and thank you so much to you and your institutions for organizing this very important event. My esteemed colleagues, both Dr. Ronan and Dr. Shahab, have already touched upon many of the most important points, but I would also like to reiterate that we are at the anniversary of the genocide from 2017, but this was not the initiation of the genocide. One could argue that the genocide actually started in 1962 when General Ne Win came to power, or possibly in 1974 when the constitution was amended to ensure that all the Rohingya are seen as foreigners, or even in 1982 when the citizenship law came out, stripping all the Rohingya of their citizenship. So these were all the precursors. When I first penned my book on the Rohingya genocide, I got lots of pushback from reviewers to even include the word genocide in the title. I had to fight with the publisher because they said that this is being alarmist and this is not an actual genocide itself. And so since that time, things have considerably moved on. 2017 seen the largest wave of the genocide in full view of the world. But the reality is, as Dr. Lee has pointed out, is that this is not the initiation. And the interesting question is, why did this happen in 2017? Why did this wave not happen before and on such a scale? And any genocide scholar will tell you that genocides do not happen in isolation. It is very common for the perpetrators of a genocide to test the ground first, to do initially small-scale attacks, small-scale massacres, and other activities to see if they will get away with it. And we've seen this in 2016 when the Tatmadaw at the time invaded a number of villages, Rohingya villages, including Dukhi Radan and others, and they undertook massive amounts of killing, burning the villages, taking, raping women, etc. And they waited to see what the reaction of the international community will be. And there's three things that they learned from that reaction. The first thing is that Aung San Suu Kyi defends the military and the government of Myanmar in public. Yeah, so Aung San Suu Kyi, the most famous citizen of Myanmar, went on TV and said that both sides are equally to blame for the violence. So it wasn't just one side, both sides are equally to blame. She also never uses the word Rohingya. She refers to them as Muslims from Rakhine. So the word Rohingya does not exist to her. That was the first thing. The second thing that Tatmadaw learned is that General Min Aung Hlaing, he went on a tour around Europe to buy armaments for his military. And all these countries in Europe rolled out the red carpet for him, particularly Austria and Germany. So he realized that there is no pushback on what he is doing in Myanmar. And the third thing that they learned is that the military became very popular in Myanmar. The military was seen as defending Buddhist values against these invading Muslim hordes from Bangladesh who are trying to take over the country. So the military became very popular. And Dr. Shahab is absolutely correct. We cannot just point the finger at the Tatmadaw. You also have to look at the clerics. The clerical establishment provided the religious legitimacy for such attacks to occur. And many of them are very well known. Some of them have been on the cover of Time magazine and others, describing themselves and very proud of their actions. And so all of this is important to understand why this actually happened. And the reaction of the international community was completely muted. There was, even to this day, there's very little interest in this issue from the international community. And I believe there's multiple reasons for this, but there are three principal reasons which I will highlight. The first reason I believe is that the Rohingya themselves are unable to advocate for themselves on the international scale at the level that is necessary for their voice to be heard. There is no Rohingya that has been elected, as far as my knowledge goes, when this happened in 2017. There was nobody of Rohingya origin in the British Parliament, in the US Congress, in the Canadian Parliament, in the European Parliament. There was nobody of Rohingya origin working in CNN or BBC. There was nobody of Rohingya origin working in Silicon Valley that's made lots of money that can say, I will put $5 million of my own money into a public awareness campaign. The Rohingya were literally right at the bottom of the ladder. And this was all by design. Most of them had been fishermen, farmers, and laborers. They didn't have the ability to advocate for themselves internationally. So that was the first reason. The second reason is that almost every policymaker that one spoke to, and I spoke to many, they believe that Aung San Suu Kyi is going to fix everything. She is now in a very difficult situation. The military are holding a gun to her head. She can't make any movements. But once she gets some proper power, she will fix everything. So we're not going to interfere in the democratic process in Myanmar and interfere with Aung San Suu Kyi. We let her do everything. So that was obviously, in hindsight, a huge mistake. And the third reason was that there's geopolitics of the region, which Dr. Shahab has also touched upon. When President Obama was president of the United States, he made 2 visits to Myanmar. And this is unprecedented. For a president of the United States to make 2 visits to any country, it's a very big deal. Now, why would the president of the US visit Myanmar? It's because Myanmar is right at the junction. It's in the heart of Asia. China has aspirations to be a global superpower, but before it can become a global superpower, it must become a regional power, and that means keeping its regional rival India in check. Access to Myanmar for China gives it access to the Bay of Bengal, and they can surround India through the string of pearls strategy. So the US is trying to keep Myanmar out of the sphere of influence of China. So you have these geopolitical machinations going on between nuclear superpowers, the US, China, India, who are all trying to fight over the domination of the most populous region in the world. Then you insert this minor group that nobody's ever heard of, nobody cares about, called the Rohingya. Nobody cares about this. So, superpowers will essentially put this to the side. So these are the 3 reasons I believe there was very little interest from the international community. Now, the question of the genocide. To me, the most astonishing thing about the Gambia case was that it was Gambia that undertook this case. It was obviously clear that these mechanisms exist in international law, but no other country that is signatory to the Genocide Convention undertook this action. And it took one tiny country called Gambia that had almost no presence in Southeast Asia to initiate this case. And this, to me, is actually very telling, because 90% of international law is politics. And if countries have no appetite to intervene, they will never intervene. They will never do anything. So whether if something is recognized as a genocide or not really comes down to politics of the individual countries. And what happens if a country recognizes a genocide? It obligates them under the Genocide Convention to take some action, to take as much action as is possible within their own abilities to do this. And if a country has no interest in intervening, they will not recognize it as a genocide. And very quickly, I will point out, there was a very famous memo, which I think was very telling during the Rwanda genocide, that went from the Department of Defense to the White House, right at the heart of the Rwanda genocide. And that memo is published in Samantha Power's book. It said, "Be careful, legal at state trying to classify this as a genocide. This will compel us to do something." Yeah, so when they don't want to do anything, they will make sure it's not recognized as a genocide. So this is the unfortunate reality of the Rohingya. I think now the situation has moved on so dramatically, and that the legal community has not moved on. The facts on the ground have changed. The Arakan army are now the dominant power that is expanding its influence, and the Tatmadaw influence is declining. So even if a genocide determination is executed by the state, and compensation, reparations, and orders are made by the ICJ, I'm not sure how much difference that will actually make on the ground when the reality on the ground has changed so dramatically. So these are things that have to be examined. And with that, Dr. Nasser, I will pass it back to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Azim Ibrahim. It is wonderful. You have a lot of issues you just brought in, and really the genocide Rohingya people started experiencing even truly in 1962, when the big military, state took the state power since then. And you also talked about like Aung San Suu Kyi's roles and responsibilities, and you also talk about why Gambia, why not other countries. Actually, Gambia is a very tiny, small country, filed the case, and particularly the Rwanda case, also the kind of comparative picture you present is wonderful. Now we'll go to our last panelist, and then we'll come back around the clock for the follow-up discussions. And I will request our panelists, Dr. Ronald, Professor Shahab, and Dr. Ibrahim, to pick up any points you need to add something, to elaborate something, to explain something you need to pick up from the previous discussions and panelists. Now, Sister Razia Sultana, please.
Thank you so much, Professor, and thank you, everyone. Dr. Ibrahim and my other Brother Khan and Ali, you are mainly focus the issue what actually we need to know. But here I also, for my experience, I will share something about for my concern. It's it's not that you have to accept this, but one thing that the genocide of the Rohingya people has haunted humanity for far too long. This is not merely a chapter of history. It is a living nightmare that continues to unfold the legal, political, and patriarchal implication. And tragically, it worsened by the ongoing atrocity commanded by the Arkan rebel group AA. The legal framework of the for preventing genocide exists, but Myanmar government continue to avoid this accountability. The ICC and ICJ are working toward justice, but Myanmar refusal to cooperate, along with the vetoes from Russia and China. And this is the main issue, that China and Russia, they are, show their color in the Myanmar issue, especially for the Rohingya issue. So when it is come, everyone know. But there are so many ways the UN or Security Council can respond. But for the justice, I don't think so. It's only in event and only in draft. But when we come to the conclusion or a solution, it just stop. What is we are seeing from the last 8 years? It was very frustrating, and the people, the children, almost 8 years. Those who are come here 14, 18, 20, 16, they become youth and they don't have any life here. And about the political implication of the Rohingya genocide are, it is an ongoing genocide. The AA and the Tatmadaw, they had one very common thing. They are fighting each other, but they have one common thing is Rohingya free Arakan, Rakhine state. And this rebel group, now they, the last 2024, the massacre where more than 600 people were the pregnant women also. And we saw so many people still coming, and they are describing this massacre, and still is in just we spread in the online, but it need a truthful investigation like 2017, because it is not just a matter. 600 is not a joke. 1,000 are died in 2024. It's from the May and the August, it was continue. So it is not just an attack, it is ongoing genocide. And the genocide is just, visible in from the world because of there is no media and nothing. We cannot provide the actual picture like the other part of the Ukraine or whatever, the Gaza. Yes, I am solidarity with the Gaza, but the picture is the same, but one is in the in front of the world and other in the behind the world. It's like our thing is not accept as a human thing. So it is a very sad, and also we need some proper advocacy. Yes, we cannot push anybody, but we want to say the thing. There is also the most important thing about political or diplomat, and the issue, the some agency, or it is my personal, they try to divide us, and you are seeing this one. So it is also a crucial part of the Rohingya issue. When we try to be united and we want to move forward, but at the end of we just divide. So it is a one kind of just Rohingya issue is only in the platform, only in the paper, but not in the solution. And my one thing is this is huge thing. The Rohingya issue is not new. It's ongoing for maybe 70, 40. There are, when I grown up in Bangladesh, and I see the every moment the atrocity is going on. So it is not a matter of avoid. So I think the Rohingya people need a safe zone. Whatever it is controversial, but for me, for my perspective, because there are so many. If Timor-Leste, if Boko Haram, if I think Iraq and also the Bosnia, because I saw the Bosnia thing. I already shared. The one thing, they are not dying. I know the process is a little bit sensitive, but at least our people can live, our children can go to school. So it is a safety, because now we don't want the democracy or sociology, but one thing is safety. For safety, we need a safe zone with whatever. There are so many things, but also we need our people should be trained, because I can say no one will give us our right. We have to take our right. So this is the thing. And if anything, I don't want to call any action or anything, just I share my concern with you, but it is end of the issue. No, we cannot, afford the more that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sister Razia Sultana. Thank you for your take and sharing your experience and your feelings. When we talk about the Rohingya genocide, Rohingya people, their sufferings, their past, it's always pleasant. It's always, heart-touching to listen to their stories from their, point of view. And always we try to, we have this deep respect for your emotion and respect. And what is important for the round follow-up discussions, I will put a couple of points what Razia Sultana actually has brought up. That's very interesting. Not only, Tatmadaw, what Professor Shahabanam Khan was talking about, just putting finger on Tatmadaw is whether we are subsiding the other spectrum of the event. Now, Arakan Army also has come up, and also international actors also have come up. And the point is that you might know during the last 1 year, more than 150,000 Rohingya newly arrived in Bangladesh across the border, just fleeing different forms of genocidal attack. So what's the actually future? The point is that, so at the beginning when I was talking, I was kicked off this event. At the time I was talking about this one, we are observing 8 Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day. Does not essentially mean that 2017 was the year, that's the only year. Long before that, Rohingya people actually started experiencing genocidal act. Now, from Sister Razia Sultana's point, we found that's the 2017 is not the year that the genocide ended there. Okay, still genocidal activity is going on. So there are multiple actors involved, and international community, regional geopolitics, global geopolitics, a lot of issues involved. Given the fact, I would request to reflect our panelists on this, the sum of the couple of points I have brought. Please, Dr. Ronald Lee, for you, 4 to 5 minutes for your follow-up discussions. Dr. Ronald Lee.
Yeah, thanks very much. Look, just a couple of points. I suppose I've talked a lot about the law and those sorts of things. I think one of the questions that I think we would validly ask ourselves is if we have very few expectations of any real action coming out of these legal processes, because we see that there just isn't the political will to enforce rulings to defend people who are victims of genocide. The question very much becomes, why bother? Does it matter? And I guess all I could say to that would be, when I talk to Rohingya about this, their view is it matters to them because they want, their expectations are very low about what will happen, but they want some recognition that what was done to them and what is being done to them is an atrocity crime. It is the crime of crimes. That's something that's important to them. So I guess from the point of view of should we continue putting efforts into justice mechanisms, I think being aware that the outcomes may not be ideal, will be very far from ideal, but there is value in doing it in terms of what it means for the Rohingya community. Azim's completely correct. I think sometime between 1962 and 1974 would be when I would feel that this genocidal process was maybe not begun, but was certainly instigated in a formal sense by the national government of Myanmar, and it has had effects on the community. Actions in the 60s and the 70s are having effects on the community today. So the removal of Rohingya from opportunities for education, which happened incrementally from the 60s and 1960s and 70s, that is having an effect today, because it means that generations on, there just aren't the people in positions of influence and power and so on, political power, to assist the community. Worth thinking about as well, the way the Myanmar authorities over decades both encouraged Rohingya to leave the country and ensured that when they left with no capacity to rebuild their lives, I think is part of that same process. Because it means that even when they leave the country, they're not in a strong position to rebuild as a powerful, politically influential diaspora. My accent doesn't give this away necessarily, but I'm Irish. I grew up in Ireland, and I've so Irish history is something that's pretty much part of my life, and I noticed the difference over time in terms of most Irish people who left Ireland left in dreadful circumstances during the famine in the 1840s, and you look at the capacity to rebuild that occurred after that, and I don't mean you never want to be comparing two different groups, but I think that what perpetrators become aware of is they see these histories and they see where a diaspora community has had some success. And then they take steps to ensure that when they're forcibly deporting the victim group from their community, they make sure that they don't have those opportunities in the future. And you see a stark difference between the political influence of various groups. And you look at some of the groups in the US whose communities have been victims of genocide historically, and you look at their political influence and you compare that to the something that has occurred deliberately on the part of the Myanmar authorities. 2017 is worth thinking about. I'm not sure whether the Myanmar military in 2017 intended that 1 million people would cross the border into Bangladesh. I suspect that they thought their objectives would be served if they followed the same process they had done previously of expelling a couple of 100,000 Rohingya. I suspect that they thought that that would be the number that they could push into Bangladesh, it would be the population in Myanmar, and that would avoid international scrutiny. I think the situation got beyond them. I think that Rohingya communities started communicating with each other within Rakhine State and letting there's helicopters coming to burn you out of your homes. And I think the numbers got bigger than the Myanmar authorities expected. And that's why this is a media issue. And that's why we're talking about August 25th of 2017. And we're not talking about 1992. And we're not talking about the early 80s. We're not talking about the late 70s. The situation today, I think I'll just finish with this. The situation today, as Azim has mentioned, in Myanmar is very perilous. The situation on the ground has changed. It's the Arakan army who I think are indistinguishable in terms of their ideological views about the Rohingya. I mean, their view of the Rohingya is identical with the Tatmadaws' view of the Rohingya. I do not think that they see any difference in terms of the Rohingya's legitimacy as a part of Myanmar. If they did, they could have said that. They've had years to say it, and they've never said the Rohingya community are a legitimate part of Rakhine State, just as the Rakhine are. They've never said that. And that's deeply worrying, because these guys have got the guns, they control the territory, and they are claiming to want to build an ethno-nationalist state within Myanmar. And I think we could well be having this discussion in 5 years' time, talking about the Tatmadaws perpetrators up until 2021, 22, and the Arakan army as genocidal perpetrators from 2022 onwards. And that situation is live now and is deeply worrying for the Rohingya who are trapped within Rakhine State with the Arakan army holding guns over them.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Your follow-up discussions actually has brought a new dimension of these genocidal discussions, because the ethno-national state formation, this kind of prediction will actually make Rohingya repatriation will make more vulnerable. And also it's very, frustrating to listen to this kind of idea that we can expect very little from the legal process, that what Ronan Lee tried to say. So I will welcome Shahabanam Khan to reflect on your follow-up discussion, please.
Thank you very much. And I think Ronan has really hit the main point. I mean, even if you look at the so-called Arakan Army apologists that I get to meet quite often, is apparently the Rohingyas have only one job in life, is to compromise with first Tatmadaw and second is Arakan Army. Apparently, Arakan Army is the solution for the Rohingya problem in the coming years. And you're absolutely right, Ronan. And I think Dr. Azim Ibrahim would also agree that as long as we don't understand the actors, I mean, we don't understand the entire problem, and the actors are multiple. And I think when Ronan really talked about that, how the Arakan army has not recognized the Rohingyas as such. I mean, they're expecting that Bangladesh as a sovereign territory, its only job is to give them every support that they would require. At the end of the day, giving us not a solution. I mean, I'm talking from a very crude national security point of view over here, but I don't want to securitize the Rohingya issue at all. And I think one issue that Razia has rightly mentioned is about the leadership. And I think that is also Dr. Ibrahim has also mentioned about that. How do we build the Rohingya leadership to a great extent? I think this is the high time when we bring the Rohingyas into the table. I mean, and discussing the issues from their leadership point of view. And I think there's a great deal of interest in Dhaka to see that the Rohingyas really get their leadership skills to continue their own political aspiration in the coming days, whether it is materializing immediately or not, but at least the discussion is surfacing in Dhaka to a great extent. Now, with that, I think another critical issue that I believe is of critical importance, that what is happening in Rakhine over the past 2 weeks. If you look at what is Tatmadaw doing, I mean, Tatmadaw is piling up resources and trying to mobilize against the Arakan army in Shiakpo. And then the billion-dollar questions comes: what will happen if Arakan army is really thinking about Seatway? I mean, remarkably, China and India converges in one place when it comes to Shiakpo or Seatway or different parts of Rakhine. Now, the blame is always, I mean, will be the biggest scapegoat for everything will be Rohingyas again, asking the question why Rohingyas are joining Tatmadaw. And if I ask them that when Rohingyas wanted to join Arakan army, did Arakan army really provide any kind of incentives to them? No. I mean, so these all superficial discussions it really shows one thing, is that the entire Rohingya discourse is being used on the basis of the priorities and the interest of different groups. Now, that is where our problem lies. I mean, I again talk from Dhaka's perspective to a great extent, is that the Rohingyas really need to choose what they want to choose. And I think when the question of choosing comes, I mean, going back to Ronan's question about why Gambia, I mean, coincidentally, Gambia was that time chairing OIC. And the very important part that OIC also wanted to be a part of this whole cabal. So I think how Rohingyas will unify themselves is also another critical question. Because historically, the major carrot and stick that has always been used, and probably Dr. Ibrahim can explain on that at some point of time, is that the dividing the Rohingyas is also very important. Because if I look at the diaspora, Rohingya diaspora narratives, and then if I see the camp narratives are not necessarily same. And then that becomes another critical question, that when we are talking towards the Rohingya repatriation, or Rohingya claiming their self-determination, or Rohingyas claiming their own land, I mean, which kind of narratives are Rohingyas going to give? I'm talking from a very, very practical point of view when it comes to, because Ronan has given the theoretical structural background, but when it comes to the surface, this is where Dhaka sees major bottleneck comes in. I mean, if you look at the diaspora views, if you look at the camp narratives, and then when the camps are becoming much more unified than ever, there are two narratives emerging. The first narratives, why are Rohingyas becoming unified? And this is my biggest question I get to hear from many of my friends coming from not Bangladesh, asking me, are they mobilizing against Arakan? I mean, well, even that is being securitized by a number of actors. And this is where I think one of the critical issue for both Ronan and Dr. Ibrahim at some point of time is that how do we harmonize this different kind of discourses, and how do we really show that what Rohingyas are doing, becoming unified and claiming for their own rights, is not a national security threat to Tatmadaw or anybody, or perhaps to the great geopolitical, the chase game. Well, of course, as Dr. Ibrahim has mentioned, and here I can see Yuki Shiozaki over here, and even Honorable Sasakawa has made so many visits to Rakhine to stabilize, talk to the ethnic armed groups, and nobody really came up with the tangible solution that the government of Japan would like to see, because everybody has their interest. I mean, and good interest, bad interest, whichever. So, what it means is that I think one of the critical crises is while we have the leadership issues looming large within the Rohingyas, then again the international community is how far international community will be receptive to the Rohingya demands that their leadership, their political leadership is required to choose the sides that they want to choose. Now, the last point before I wrap it up, and I think this is where another critical factor lies, is that how Rohingyas are going to negotiate. What are the negotiation point? I mean, I get to hear, I mean, a lot of foreigners would come to Dhaka, and the first question they would say that, is Bangladesh pushing them? I mean, who are the Bangladeshis to push them? I mean, if somebody wants to go back to Rakhine, it is their choice. I mean, Bangladesh, if Bangladesh was doing that, they would have done it long back. I mean, look at my neighborhood. I mean, everybody is pushing the Rohingyas out. I mean, we don't do that. I mean, and the very important point is that the spirit of this state doesn't allow us to do that. And this is why I think one of the critical future, 5 years down the lane, when Ronan, myself, or probably yourself, Professor Nasir, or Dr. Ibrahim, we will be debating about the leadership and how we get this leadership to come into a common consensus within themselves first, and then subsequently the international level.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of engaging, a lot of brainstorming ideas actually have come up by the time. And it's also the question of repatriation and also self-determination, diaspora activism, and a lot of issues. So how all these issues are actually closely related to the whole genocide recognitions is also a big question. I have received a lot of questions for the panelists from the social media platform. We'll go after the panelists follow-up discussions, and the participants who are in the Zoom platform, I would request you to put your question on the chat box so that we can pick up a couple of relevant, very meaningful questions to enrich our discussions. Now I will go to Professor Azim Ibrahim for your follow-up discussions. Professor Azim Ibrahim.
Thank you, Dr. Nasser. So I agree with everything that my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Shahab and Dr. Lee, have mentioned. And also, I think Sister Razia has pointed out a very important point about the genocide question itself and the victimology of the Rohingya and the extent to which they're suffering. And it's not just about killing or wiping out the groups, it's the actual identity of the group as well. You know, I suspect on the current trajectory, they will be basically, the Rohingya will be gone in 2 generations. And I don't mean gone physically, the individuals themselves, but in terms of an identity group. There is not enough Rohingya left in Myanmar to reconstitute themselves as an identity group, as an ethnic minority identity group within Myanmar. Almost all the Rohingya are now living in, the majority of them are now in refugee camps in Bangladesh, obviously the largest one in the world. And then we're also all over the world, you know, in Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, Pakistan, Karachi, everywhere is a Rohingya. And so within 1 or 2 generations, what will it mean to be a Rohingya? Their language, their culture, their history, their way of life will all be diluted into host communities. So the Rohingya will essentially become almost like the Native Americans or like the Kurdish diaspora, people that don't have any fixed location. They're just everywhere around the world. And this will be most unfortunate because once we reach that point, it'll be very difficult then to find any sort of solution, which brings me to my second point. You know, when you speak to many of the people that are involved in this issue, everybody knows what the desired outcome would be, that the Rohingya should go back to their native country in Rakhine. But one also has to be very realistic about how this is possible. We have to remember that Bangladesh is now hosting, such a substantial number of Rohingya, and the precise number is not known. You know, I've tried to look into this, but over 1 million were in the camps around 2017 when they first came. That number has increased. You know, I've now seen estimates of 1.4 million because they are new generation of Rohingya being born in the camps. People that have no identity, no state, they have no connection to Rakhine. And so what do you do with 1.4 million people? You know, how do they go back to Rakhine? This is not a realistic proposition. The reality is that when the Rohingya were expelled, the villages were bulldozed, burned down, and the land was redistributed to local Rakhine. So the facts on the ground have changed. And no matter what the goodwill of any potential future government of Myanmar may be, is not practically possible to take back 1.4 million people. And so we have to look at solutions, multiple solutions to this crisis. You know, I also feel it's hugely unfair. Bangladesh comes under lots of criticism, but this is not a problem that Bangladesh, wanted to take on. It is already one of the most densely populated countries in the world, with a land mass is shrinking every year because of climate change and rising sea levels. And Bangladesh has been forced into this situation. And I've had interaction with various diplomats, from countries around ASEAN. And I remember very clearly, many years ago during the UN General Assembly, we had the foreign ministers of a number of ASEAN countries in New York and Washington. And I requested to meet with them to discuss this issue of the Rohingya. And many of them agreed. Many of them agreed to meet with me while they're in Washington. When they asked why I want to meet, I told them I want to meet to discuss the Rohingya crisis. All of them cancelled their meetings because they know, the countries in the region, that there is no solution to this. They don't see any solution to this crisis. And the only thing they're going to ask anyone that asks to meet on the Rohingya is either we give more money to Bangladesh or we take refugees from Bangladesh. Yeah, and they don't want to do either of those things. So let Bangladesh take care of this problem and they will simply ignore it. And that's been the reaction, apart from some countries that show nothing beyond goodwill, but there's no actual solutions being presented, no burden sharing, no assistance in any capacity whatsoever. The only country that really seems to be interested is Bangladesh itself, because they have to bear the burden of this. So these are things that we have to try to figure out, is that the Rohingya really do, as Dr. Shahab has very eloquently mentioned, really do have to take the lead on this. Nobody can speak for the Rohingya except the Rohingya themselves. They really have to get themselves organized to be able to advocate and present solutions and ideas on the international on the international stage, get all the stakeholders together. And, and this is something that they will have to really get together very soon, because at the moment doesn't seem to be happening. And, other people are speaking for the Rohingya, and others have very different interests, apart from that, really differ very vastly from what the Rohingya actually desire. But we have to start thinking of innovative solutions, small solutions in different ways in which you can improve the lives of the Rohingya in the camps. You can improve the lives of the Rohingya diaspora. You can have a more stronger voice for them in international fora, and only the Rohingya can do that. Otherwise, this idea that you hear over and over again that they want to they want to prosecute the military leadership and they want to all go back to Rakhine. If you keep pushing for that, I think, and that is obviously the desirable outcome, but it's also not very realistic. This also just kind of, in many ways, shuts down the debate if that is the only request that you have, rather than pushing for more smaller, realistic solutions to this crisis. And with that, I'll pass it back to the chair.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the discussion actually, we are
I think the host has gone frozen.
actions. Just will go for Q&A. Before I will request Razia Sultana to talk about what's going on, what we need to do in 5 minutes, please.
Today I saw in the newspaper, coming November, WFP will stop the food. So think about the situation about the Rohingya, how they can survive. The last 8 years, they are always depend on this WFP, because the system is created by NGOs or INGO, because we didn't we are not concerned about the livelihood issue. So now the difficult time is coming, and now we have to face this one. And another issue, now this government also, I hope the coming governments will be focused on the education. And another issue, I realized that we lots of struggle, and after the 2017 and 2019, we got ICJ. But now also, I feel we are now same in that match. I think the same era. Now it's the AA. Now we have to prove that AA is, killing, or they are also doing the massacre and doing genocide. So every moment Rohingya have to prove. Why we have to prove that we are Rohingya, we are in that land, and every moment, even now in the last month, I was in the Masot and Karen. They are asking my identity. They say why there's lots of question. I say we are the belong, because there is a very big fact that we are more concentrated about in the international level who are using. I'm not telling about everyone who are using us, but we just undermine our other ethnic groups, our other Burmese. So we have to, make a connection, make them that that we are not an outsider, because there is a long way. The brainwash that these Rohingya are outsiders. So most of the people, they thought we are outsiders, and they are support in 2017, even the 2012. They start in the 2012, and it continues now. Is the AA? It openly denied it us. So this, why should we have to prove ourselves? We will not. We are just ask our right, and we want to go back, but we have to find a way. But one thing, it is not it's about everyone. No one will give us our right. Again, I say, we have to take our rights. So I encourage our youth, you have to think about that. And even diaspora leader, oral service, enough. Now let's do some action. Just stop being a leader. Stop being, you are the gate. You are the one great. No one is like you. We are all equal because we are from the Rohingya. And this is our matter. We have to solve this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful discussions, very engaging discussions, a lot of critical points we have found in our panelists, different kind of discussions. So we have a couple of questions in the chat box from the participants who are in Zoom platform. If you want to raise any questions, want to reflect, make any comments, so you can raise your hands so that I can give you a floor. Before that, just I want to make some couple of summary questions I've received from the social media platforms. The point is that the fundamental question is, why is genocide recognitions? Why does genocide recognitions matter for the Rohingya people? Why? If, for example, International Court of Justice over the years, after a long trial and hearing, for example, after 5 years, 10 years, if they give a kind of verdict, yes, there is a genocide, happen, what will be actually, the significance of this kind of verdict to the life of the Rohingya people? Any panelist can respond to this question, please. There's a common question I received from the social media platform. A lot of people raise these questions. What's a relationship between the verdict of genocide and the life of everyday life of Rohingya people? Anybody? Ajim? Yeah. Dr.
So
Ajim.
I think that's a very, very good question. And once again, it's about expectations management. I remember when the Gambia case was first initiated, one of our colleagues, I think everybody on the panel knows him, Professor John Packer, who also been working on this issue for a long time. He was actually in the camps in Cox's Bazar. And the question he was getting from everybody is that, oh, this is great news. Does that mean we can now go back home? And it was obviously a misunderstanding of what this actually means. This was just the initiation of the case. So when eventually a genocide determination is made, what will it actually have practical impact? And we've seen with the situation in the Middle East as well is that international law simply does not have the kind of capacity and cachet and ability to enforce it once did. And so many years down the line, we simply don't know what that situation may be. So we have to be very realistic in terms of our expectations. But I think Dr. Lee was absolutely correct, is that it is not just about delivering justice, but also correcting and ensuring the historical record that this is a genocide. And so the change might not happen immediately, but the fact that it is recognised as a genocide also has implications around the world for Rohingya diaspora, Rohingya refugees that are seeking shelter in countries overseas. If their situation is regarded as genocide, it does mean that they are fast-tracked for political asylum, they are fast-tracked for certain benefits, in those host countries. So it does have other implications that, beyond just direct justice that a lot of the Rohingya are looking for. But I think the most important thing is essentially the historical record that many Rohingya have been talking about, and something that has been pushed back by lots of even international scholars that this is not a genocide. But once again, I would reiterate, we just have to be very realistic in terms of expectations and not raise the hopes of Rohingya in terms of what might be delivered by any sort of determination by whether it's the ICC or the ICJ.
Yeah. So Ronald, do you want to say something on this topic? This is a very, very, very challenging one.
I agree entirely with what's just been said. I mean, I think one of the key things for the community, I mean, leaving aside the misunderstanding about what they might think might happen, there's certainly something that comes through when I talk to Rohingya about this, is that they want to have some competent legal international body make clear that what was done to them is the crime of crimes. That's something that they want. But in terms of the expectations that go with that, there are huge expectations about what could occur. I mean, that you can't live in the circumstances of those camps and not maintain some degree of optimism for your future. you just couldn't function as a human being. You have to be hopeful about something can change, something otherwise you'd give up, or you'd try and, I mean, huge numbers of people are trying to get out. But I think it is important for the community, and the historical record is immensely important for the community and its identity in the long term. I'm like Azim, very unoptimistic about the future of the community, and this is important to them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a very, we cannot actually answer this kind of question to, in 1 or 2 sentences. There's a long process, a lot of issues involved. So I have another questions for the panelists.
Can before you go on, I just want to come in, Dr. Nasser. So one of the advantages of the ICJ case, and this is has not been examined enough, is the fact that it did expose Aung San Suu Kyi. Many diplomats that I spoke to, many even officials in the US and elsewhere, were shocked that she would come and defend the military in such a way. And a significant portion of the international community still had faith in her, that look, she doesn't have the authority, she doesn't have the power, but she's definitely going to change the situation for the Rohingya. And the ICJ case, when she turned up in The Hague and defended the military to the hilt, put all of that to bed. And I do have to say that, Dr. Ronan Lee is actually one of the first people in the world, to actually mention this about Aung San Suu Kyi. I remember our conversation, Ronan, when we were in London. You're one of the earliest people that to expose Aung San Suu Kyi for what she was. And it was a very unpopular opinion at that time. Everybody was basically pushing for her to take the lead. She's a Nobel laureate. She was Oxford graduate. She's going to defend all the minorities. And I remember Dr. Lee was one of the only people in the world that was saying, look, this is just not the case at all. And so he was completely vindicated when she turned up at The Hague. He was vindicated, unfortunately, but he was vindicated.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. We have just 12 minutes left. So I have another questions for the panelists. If we cannot make the Myanmar state and junta responsible for genocide through ICC and ICJ, now if it comes to the non-state actors like Arakan Army now doing the same genocidal act, how can they be tried by law? Anyone could respond to these questions? Yeah, Ajit, please.
Yeah, I think Dr. Shahab wants to come in.
Yeah.
No, Dr. Ibrahim, you go, then I'll follow your lead.
Yeah. Okay, please.
Because it's very important to hear from you.
Yeah, I think. Thank you very much. I think it's a very good question. What leverage would one have over the Arakan Army if you simply do not have the legal mechanisms of the international law to change the behavior of the Tatmadaw and the Myanmar government? The reality is very little. But once again, I think it comes down to not using just the levers of international law, but also diplomacy. One of the things that the Arakan Army, or the key thing that they're looking for, is international legitimacy and international recognition. And if there's any way to put preconditions on any sort of recognition of the Arakan Army and their position, and link it to the recognition of different ethnic groups, not just the Rohingya, but the Karen, the Shan, and others, then this is something that is a tool that could be negotiated. And once again, this all comes down to international actors and diplomacy, and the Rohingya being able to make their case in international fora to make this a precondition for any sort of dialogue with the Arakan Army, that until you recognise these groups as equal citizens, then there is absolutely no pathway to recognition. And I think this is probably one of the only levers I see that's going to be available. I think many of the mechanisms for international law and others will not have the same kind of effect. So that's just my thoughts.
But before go to Professor Shahab, I would just request the panelists. There are a lot of questions in the chat box. If you want, you can just reply to the air, because we have just 10 minutes left. We'll just catch 3 questions more. Professor Shahab and Amkan, please. So how could actual Arakan Army be tried by law?
I think it is very difficult at the moment because of 2 reasons. First of all, who's going to bell the cat? I mean, when it comes to belling the cat, who are the authorities over here? I mean, everybody wants, as I indicated, I mean, the rise of Arakan army apologist is so astronomically high, and these are coming from the West generally, right? And that's a problem. Even I get to see in our own fraternity. I mean, the NGO fraternity would just jump in and start talking about it. Now, at least the UN has started some sort of move, which is a good thing. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, the problem is that UN has its own limitation. I mean, which again makes the situation even more complicated. Despite it's a tiger without claws, and this is where the major problem lies with the internationalist approach to that. This is one, and the second is the only way I get to see. I mean, if I wear my devil's advocate coat, I mean, the only way they will be pushed back if the Chinese and the Indians want, and coming together in the Rakhine territory. I mean, and I'm not saying that this is a justice, but that's the only
It's a
thing
very
I'm saying.
dangerous
And
proposition.
and then second, you are seeing the national unity government. We haven't talked about national unity government, and the national unity government is at the end of the day, if there is an election, or even if there is, then the national unity government comes in, which is essentially NLD's extension. But the good part, this is where the hope becomes the only strategy, is when NUG, and I had my interaction with NUG quite extensively, and at least some sort of understanding that the Rohingya recognition is very much within their colloquial. And the question is whether they're going to exert it is one issue, and the second, whether the Rohingyas themselves believe in that, is another issue. Now,
Yeah.
this is where I think even if there is a small window to work, I think there is that small window. And of course, Ronan has done a tremendous job when he really talked about that. The Nobel Prize doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has become saints and angels. So, and this is where I think we really have a little window to work on. And I'm not saying that that is the best solution, but at the
Professor
moment,
Shahab Anam, let
you.
me stop you because we're running out of time. We have a very, it's very engaging discussions most of the time. The RML, event always becomes very lively, very engaging. A lot of people are involving. So I have one more very little question. I would request panelists to respond to the questions in 1 or 2 minutes so that we can cover up a lot of. Sister Razia, we have a question for you. What do you mean by oral surveys by the diaspora Rohingya people? What do you mean by oral service?
Oral service.
Yeah, please.
You see, everywhere we are just arranging event, and we are just said we demand it, we action it. There is any action we see? No, we didn't see. Maybe after 8 years, the system of voting, whatever the Dr. Inu's initiative, I think there is some good. But before 8 years, myself also, I did the lip service. Even one thing I say, not a single person we can say. Not a single person. And another issue about the AA, the previous question, international humanitarian law, IHL, the AA, like and any armed groups, is bound by the international humanitarian law, which included the Geneva Convention, IHL, prohibit attack on civilians, sexual violence, and other crime that could be categorized as a war crime or a crime against the humanity. If the AA engage in such act, it can be held accountable, even though it is not a state actor. So there is some window, just war crime, crime against humanity, we can do.
So UN should come forward to step in.
Yes,
So
UN should.
yeah,
Also,
so
there
we
is a small
should
window.
not forget that
ICC
Mr.
also.
Razia is a lawyer, is an advocate.
But ICC also, there is also ICC. There
Yeah,
is some
International
clause
Code of
here. Yes,
International
you
Criminal
know
Code.
better than me. And I know
Okay.
Azim also know
Thank
that.
you so much. So I will go for the last question. There's a last question before wrap up. Is the Rohingya crisis merely a bilateral issue across Naf River or a global challenge? If it is
Global.
indeed a global problem, why should Bangladesh alone bear the responsibilities for addressing the crisis, ensuring the safe, voluntary, and dignified repatriation of the Rohingya refugees? Does the world have no role to play in the shared challenge? So that's the last question for all of you. Each panelist has 1 minute to respond to
1
it.
minute. One thing, why should Bangladesh take this burden? And this is a global issue because it's related to the global economy. It is related to the business as usual because each of the country have target the business, not the human. When you research the thing, you can understand it is a global issue. So it's a geopolitics. It's not a single Bangladesh burden.
Why
So
that Bangladesh
yes,
is
Bangladesh
alone
has to be
carrying the
moved.
burden?
Why should for
stop
me
that burden?
why should they they did lots of things. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your Professor Azim. Please, 1 or 2 minutes, just 1 minute. Last point.
Yeah, so I think I addressed this earlier. Is that as Sister Azia says, you know, just most unfortunate that Bangladesh has to bear this burden on its own. But the reality is that countries in the region are not interested in this issue. They want it just to go away. They want Bangladesh to bear the burden and for them not to get involved at all because they simply don't see any way out of this. The only thing that they're going to be asked is to give money to Bangladesh or to take refugees, and they don't want to do either of those things. And so it's basically once again comes down to the Rohingya community and others to try to figure out micro solutions to this to incentivize countries to step up in their responsibility. And there's multiple ways that could be done, you know, through trade agreements and through favourable terms of loans, etc., to make this a precondition for them to step up to their responsibilities, especially the ASEAN countries, which have really kind of not lived up to their own mandate.
Thank you, Dr. Ronald Lee. 1 minute.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with what's been said. I mean, it's just a shame that Bangladesh is bearing such a big burden for something that should be dealt with internationally. I should say, in terms of prosecuting the AA for crimes, the International Criminal Court can prosecute individuals for crimes. So the Arakan Army should not feel that it will have impunity for what it does. Just because it wasn't involved in 2017 doesn't mean actions today or yesterday or in the future won't be prosecuted. In terms of why Professor Ibrahim's comments about international recognition are important, there are significant gas reserves in Rakhine State. I think it's no surprise that the UN's envoy to Myanmar is someone who has close connections with Woodside Petroleum through her time in politics, the Australian Julie Bishop. Woodside has interests. It's a major Australian company, has interests in Rakhine State, and that will be a pressure point in the future, I think, in terms of recognising the Arakan Army, and it would be hugely problematic for a company, an Australian company like Woodside, to be dealing with people who don't recognise the basic human rights of the Rohingya community. So that's certainly going to be a pressure point in the future, I hope.
Thank you. Professor Shahamanam Khan, last minute.
Thank you very much. And I think it is unfair to say that world hasn't done anything. It has done. I mean, it has done within its limited capacity what it can do. And of course, geopolitics is there, geoeconomics is there. Ronan has rightly brought the geoeconomics over here, how the Australians can be brought into the accountability measures. And of course, international courts can always be mobilized. But what my last point, and that's the last takeaway, is that I think we have wasted enough time. And rather than looking into the meaningful solution, we have been relying on too much of who can do what and who can do not what. And I think Razia is absolutely right that it is time for the Rohingyas to come up with solutions too. I mean, the states can only facilitate it or put a stop to that, right? Whichever way. But at the end of the day, solution has to come. And I think what Dr. Yunus has really indicated that we are very much prepared to provide substantial support to the Rohingyas to undertake leadership activities. And I must warn before that. Don't get diluted into the capitalist notion of leadership, rather the ideologically driven leadership. That is very important. Always remember that leadership comes with a lot of security tagging as well. So therefore, it is the government it is the Rohingyas who has to come forward. And I think Professor Azim himself is a great example, and people like Professor Ronald Lee, all of them can put intellectual resources to help this process to move forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are just near about to close. We have discussed a lot of issues, a lot of points, but the fundamental point is that actually Rohingya peoples in all respects, in all considerations, are the victims of all kind of genocidal act, started from 1962. Even if you talk about 8 Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day, they were the victims, even from the Arakan Army, what Arakan Army is doing in Rakhine State, Rohingya peoples are the victims. The point is that there are a lot of state actors, non-state actors are working at the local level, at the global level, but the life of the people, more than 1 million people, Rohingya people living in the camps, their life, their life, everyday life is not actually improving a lot. So what's the point? When we are actually talking about genocide, the trial, International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, roles of international actors, geopolitics, a lot of issues. But the borderline of all discussions is to improve the life of the people, bring the justice and accountability. That all we are trying to say here. So before ending, I already at the beginning, I talked about it. I already declared that this event is supported by UCL's one of the research projects, the Politics of Denial and Non-Recognition of Genocide, funded by the British Academy. So I will request Dr. Bias from UCL to say a few words before I end up. Dr. Bias.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Professor Nasir, for organizing this webinar, and also to the 4 other distinguished scholars on this topic. Really, I know some of you and glad to meet others here. And thank you, RML, for organizing it. But quickly, after listening to all the discussions for about 90 minutes, I want to quickly sum up in 3 things, 3 points I have. First, I think we should thank all the Bangladeshi citizens for hosting the Rohingya refugees since 1971. And the number is currently right now, the registered number is 1.2 million. And unofficially, that's 1.5 million. And remember, Bangladesh is world's by far margin, most densely populated country. And many countries even do not have 1.5 million in their total population, like Bhutan, Maldives, many small islands, even Qatar, Bahrain, many, you name it. I found at least 40 countries that have even less than total population of our Rohingya camps that we're hosting here. So thank you to the Bangladeshi people. Second, I think we forgot to connect the dots. We have to be really honest, outspoken, and bold. Otherwise, I have been listening to this kind of discussion since 2017, clearly. Many of you attended many of our workshops here at UCL. It's the same thing we're circling around. Why? The problem is, I give you an example very quickly. I have been talking to many scholars, like genuine genocide scholars, like professors, lecturers. They are divided. Some are saying genocide is happening in Ukraine, but the same person is saying not happening in Gaza. even within the Bangladeshi scholars, the same person is saying Rohingya genocide is happening, but they are saying that nothing happened in 1971 during Bangladesh Liberation War. People are being put into jail. In everywhere, in the US, I have seen students, scholars. I know one genocide scholar renowned is now planning to leave US because the hostile environment is really hostile for genocide scholars and searching for jobs in Europe. Same in Bangladesh. You cannot talk about 71. You're talking about 2017 Rohingya, Ukraine, Gaza. So the main equation is we are not connecting the whole geopolitics and the politics within the Security Council, the UN Security Council, where the five people, countries, they have the power for veto. Okay. As Raja mentioned clearly, China and Russia, no response. But the same US thinks 2017 genocide in Rohingya happened. The same country thinks nothing happened in 1971 in Bangladesh. So we all are scholars, UN Security Council, global network of all these activists, even people within the same Bangladesh, forget about the scholars, people are divided. So I don't see personally this kind of like self-protective discussions, academic discussions are really good for writing books, publications, journals, and all those things. But given the complex geopolitics, ideological differences, and also many other issues, cultural, socioeconomic, things are not going to happen in your favor. So two is that's the point. And third and lastly, I want to say Bangladesh needs to think about, and also the Rohingya community, think about some practical implications. Okay, we cannot wait for our ICJ verdict. Even the verdict is in our favor, then what? Can you repatriate or return one single Rohingya to Rakhine? Even the verdict is with you? No. So what Bangladesh will do? Bangladesh, even remember, it is not a developed country like Bahrain, or Maldives. We are one of the least developed countries in the world, according to the UN OECD, official list. Even our economic situation is really not that good. So remember how we can genuinely return the Rohingyas or repatriate them with dignity should be our top priority. If it doesn't happen, then the other option we have to think carefully. What about local integration or resettlement? I don't see any hope. Even I see in the UK, even the asylum seekers, refugees, all are being, kicked out. So these three things we should think about. Thanking Bangladesh, the geopolitics of recognition of genocide is really complex because remember, it's not the country who is doing genocide, all these things. The countries involved who are complicit, that is most complex, who are supplying those arms, who are continuing business, economic activities, enabling all those things. So that's the main problem. It's not the Myanmar is not the problem. Who are supporting them? Gaza is not the problem. Who are supplying the arms? That's why you will never get genocide recovery. And third, Bangladesh and the Rohingya communities should work together to think for some realistic implications to resolve this long-standing genocidal campaign from not only Myanmar, many other countries are involved there. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, we see you again next year. We are planning to organize an international conference at UCL, and many of you will be there. I hope so. And thanks, Professor Nasir and others.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Baez, and thank you so much, Professor Ajim Ibrahim. Thank you so much, Professor Shahabinam Khan, and thank you so much, Dr. Ronald Lee, and thank you so much, Sister Razia Sultana, for your wonderful, meaningful, engaging discussions. And I believe discussion is important before action, because the meaningful, constructive discussion could produce really meaningful policy framing. So that's why, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much to the spectators who are watching this event from around the world. Thank you so much.